good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to this episode of the Life with a Why interview series podcast. This is the interview series where we find out why people do what they do. And today, we're interviewing Joe Van Erps, a highly successful salesperson who has built out multiple sales strategies and multiple sales tech startups all over Europe. Today, we talk about why somebody lives life at breakneck speed. Joe is one of those people who is perpetually busy, always running from task to task, goal to goal, milestone to milestone. I myself have been guilty of it in the past, and we all know somebody who is always pushing forth the next thing. Joe is one of those people, and today we understand why somebody lives life at breakneck speed, how you get into such a pattern, whether or not it is actually beneficial for the goals that you're trying to hit. Joe has also lived a very international life, so he has had to live multiple different chapters of his life in multiple different settings. That has an impact on someone. Today we discuss that. Today we learn why somebody lives life at breakneck speed and how they avoid hitting speed bumps. Let's get chatting. Well, Joe, thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming on the podcast. How are you, man? How are you feeling?
Hey, man. Thank you for having me. First of all, good to see you again. I mean,
You too,
we've
man.
spoken a couple of times already in various scenarios. I'm good. I'm currently not in Germany or in Holland. I'm in Dubai right now, enjoying the warm weather for a bit, and but soon we'll be back in Europe.
Nice one. And the fact that you're traveling is something I think we'll come back to later on today. But no, it's good.
Yes, please.
It's good to see that you're out in Dubai. I am jealous. We are just about to come out of lockdown here in Ireland. However, you guys over in Dubai never really had one, and I'm so jealous.
Yeah, doesn't really exist here, does it?
Which is great. Well, look, at this stage, people will know what you do. But my first question for you is, apart from what you do, it's instead of listing out your CV, who are you? Like, who are you to you?
So I would say I'm a person that always grew up in an extremely international environment. So I've met a lot of nationalities early on in my life. I'm half Belgian, half German, right? And growing up in Brussels, which is somehow also, the headquarter of Europe, so to say, made me realize that it's so good to talk to many different people from all kinds of life. And I think, over the past few chapters in my life, moving from Munich towards Zurich, from Brussels to Zurich, from Zurich to Munich, and now to Amsterdam, made me realize that I'm definitely a person that always wants to have a new chapter at some point. So getting out of the comfort zone is definitely how I would describe myself, and being a very open person.
That sounds great. And it's funny that you mentioned the chapters, because you've had quite a few different, and when I say different, I mean like drastically different chapters. They've all sort of lived under the world of, I'm just going to say, like, business, kind of, except for Zurich. And then, but yeah, so can you tell me a little bit more about, or tell us a little bit more about those chapters? Because
Sure.
They are very different.
Absolutely. So maybe one more thing to say, as a small boy growing up in Brussels, I was a huge car guy. So maybe the one thing that always stayed the same was that I'm a huge car fanatic. And as a small boy, I had the dream one day of building my own cars. So I thought back in school that, studying mechanical engineering, for example, at a top school in Europe would be a great idea. And I'd say the first chapter of my life after high school, after growing up in Brussels, was making the move to Zurich to initially start studying mechanical engineering. And there I found out that it's something completely different, right?
Yeah, it's not all building cars.
No. But I enjoyed one thing in particular while living in Switzerland. It was, watching cars and visiting car shows. And so while I then visited the Geneva car show, I met a guy, Etienne, and he and we did something which had nothing to do at all with mechanical engineering. Basically, what we did is, we copied a concept based in Germany and moved that to the Swiss market, which was on-demand car cleaning without, any water that gets lost. So yeah, that is the first chapter in my life that made the switch from something very technical to something which has more to do with business and sales.
So what brought you from Brussels to Switzerland was the fact that you love cars. And then what brought you from, let's say, mechanical engineering to setting up this company was also, loving cars. But that's what brought you into the world of business.
Yes. And the funny part is, back in high school, European school, Brussels 3, basically my maths teacher said, when I told him that I would be, studying mechanical engineering, he said, that's a bad idea. So actually, that was one time I didn't, listen to a teacher where I thought after, maybe I should have listened earlier.
Maybe they were right.
Because it turned out to be a great idea, not doing, anything maths related, but more going into the business side. But yeah, that's really where I discovered my passion for sales. And I think that's what driven me since going into, the next chapters of my life.
And before we get into the actual beginning of the first few questions, just to give people a timeline, after you did that car cleaning company, just quickly, what happened next and what brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I decided that, mechanical engineering was definitely not my thing. Also, my grades were extremely bad. So it became clear that, I would be looking for something different. Now, while I was, building up that company together with Etienne, it was still clear to me that, I had to at least try doing something else when it comes to uni. And that's maybe also something interesting to talk about. It's definitely that I got all the chances in life to, study what I want. But on the other hand, if your parents, come from that background, you also don't want to disappoint them, right? And you don't want to do something completely crazy out there at that age. So I was 19, turning 20. And, initially I then said, okay, I'm also going to move to Munich because Munich has an actual very strong background in young entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. So especially for people that are also still studying, it's one of the best in Europe, I'd say. So I started officially studying in Munich, but also getting to know the entrepreneurial room in there. And at the same time, I obviously got to know about a thing which is software sales. Yeah. And that is then really where it kicked off when we're talking about my career part in sales.
So you moved to Munich before you had the job at Demo Desk?
Absolutely. Yeah. Right, so
okay.
Funny story, I wanted to learn from good entrepreneurs, right, that already achieved much more than what we did with the local business, car cleaning business. And I had the opportunity to join a legal tech company before my Demo Desk journey, which is called DataGuard. Mm-hmm. And the funny side story there is I applied to become an entrepreneur in residence. And basically the founder called me up one day before my official start date, saying, you can't do it. I need you in sales. We have too few people in sales. Can you please do this business development job? So the deal was, no, I said, okay, but I want to actually do the entrepreneur in residence thing. And he said, okay, do this for 6 months and you'll get that job.
Right.
And I said, okay, let's do it. And that's how I actually started knowing about what sales development roles are in a software sales company. Nice. And that's where I had the grind that you're now having, right? Mm-hmm. With the SDR job. And that's where I learned all the basics, basically, when it comes to that business. And after those 6 months, I never looked back. I stayed in the role. I didn't become an entrepreneur in residence. I moved into a closing role.
You moved into
that's how it kicked off.
In Demo Desk, you spent how long there?
At Demo Desk in itself? Yeah. So at Demo Desk in total, that would be now 17 or 18 months.
Okay, so you did a year and a half at Demo Desk, And now you are about to, actually, I'll let you explain.
Yeah, so I did my part at Demodesk, being the first sales hire, seeing a company which was pre-seed, getting the seed round, and then the Series A round, which was amazing in that short time frame, right?
Yeah.
And now the opportunity arrived of joining a company called Miro, which probably a bit more people know about when we compare to Demodesk, just because it's a much larger company. We're looking at making the shift from a company of 40 to 45 people, now at a level 700 to 800 people.
Damn, that is rocket ship level growth, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So your
Yes.
journey has brought you from Brussels to in high school to Zurich, looking at cars, to Munich, trying to be an entrepreneur and taking a random sales job in order to get there, realizing you love sales, building out Demodesk, and now about to do it again at Miro.
Correct.
So that's what you do, and that's what you have done. But I want people to get a little bit more of a sense as to who you are. So I've got a question for you. What would be, or what has been, the most amazing adventure you've ever been on?
I'd say, one thing I haven't talked about yet about me is that apart from cars, I always had the opportunity to travel a lot when I was smaller as well, through my parents. And one of the most amazing adventures I've been on was on the African continent. We were in South Africa, and we took a train called the Rovos Rail. Have you ever heard about it?
I haven't, no.
So Rovos Rail is a family-led business for 2 or 3 generations now, and they built these trains a bit like the Orient Express. So imagine just a train with maybe 10, 15 wagons and a maximum of 50 people going on a journey of maybe from 3 to 14 or 30 days driving through the country with a train. And why that was one of the best adventures I've ever been on was because I realized after 2 days of driving, you don't meet anybody else than those 50 people. You don't have a choice, but, talking to them. And then one thing happened, which was they stole the copper wire on our journey. So that meant the train stood just still for 2 days. And the train manager telling us, yeah, we don't know when we will continue because they have to actually, drive a diesel powered locomotive to our position, which is in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And essentially, that was just where it got really funny because those 50 people, suddenly they really are bored at one point, right? You're not moving anymore. So they start talking about, where they're coming from, what they're doing next, what the history of the family is. So you hear some crazy stories and people opening up to other complete strangers.
Yeah.
And that's where I just noticed, man, that is amazing. If you actually give the opportunity to people to be in a position of just opening up, that's what I love. I love listening to stories. And I must say that on its own was just one of the most amazing adventures I've ever been on.
Getting on a train through Africa.
Yeah.
Having the parts be stolen off the train and be stuck with 50 people on a train and getting to know each other.
Yeah, and pretty much that, not going anywhere. You can't.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, and then they told us stories. So the train personnel told us stories about, oh yeah, we got robbed 2-3 times, in the past 5 years. So we protected the train with extra, protected glass and stuff like that. So that was also interesting. Nothing happened, luckily.
Man,
but yeah, it spiced it up.
No wonder you ended up in sales when you learn to talk at that age. Like,
yes.
That's pretty.
100%.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, a lot of the different, and thank you for sharing that story. I think it gives people a little bit more of an insight into what's important to you. One of the things that we talked about was all of the different chapters that you've had. And I get the feeling that those will have been different versions of Joe in each one of them. So when did this version of you solidify? The one that I'm talking to right now. When did this version of you come around? And how? And also, you can also answer this question by saying that it hasn't solidified yet, because I get the feeling you're going through a big moment of change at the moment. So who am I talking to right now?
I would say that, one of the big moments where I definitely got to know myself a bit better is making the change of realizing that my journey, at least at Demo Desk, was ending. So if we just think back of it, I joined the company when we were 5 or 6 people. I was the first sales hire. There was no processes. Suddenly there was hyper growth, 2 financing rounds. And then that journey ended because of a disagreement with leadership, which happens in sales. Actually, if you think about it, average tenure is 17 months or 18 months, I think, if you're in the position.
Absolutely.
So still, I never realized that it could happen to me. I was living in a day-to-day world, day-to-day meetings, day-to-day talking about targets, closing business, building teams, etc. And then suddenly that realization came. And that was a moment where actually for the first time, I'd say in 2 to 3 years, I could take a step back and look at, okay, what just happened? Not talking about that one event of not being with the company anymore, but actually what happened in the past 2, 3 years. That's crazy. And that's where I realized reflecting on these adventures from time to time and not having to worry about the day-to-day business anymore in your professional career. That's one of the most enlightening moments in my life. So I'd say that really did something.
So you hadn't been, let's say, reflecting or thinking about it. You were very much living. Can I ask, were you living in the future or living in the moment for the future?
I'm a person that lives in the now.
Okay.
Sometimes that's good. Sometimes that's not so good.
Uh-huh.
And I'd say if we're talking about the things that are not so good, actually it's quite good with comparing it to Dubai, where I'm at right now, because Dubai is a huge bubble. I don't think that is a surprise to many. But sometimes our own lives are a huge bubble as well, because we don't think too much of what's going to happen in 1 or 2 years because of the fact that you're so busy and because of the fact that you're happy. But then again, that makes you miss things. And for me, that was 2 things. The first one, where I really realized, okay, I neglected that a bit, was definitely the family part. So relatives, building or maintaining, nurturing the relationship with my parents, with my grandparents, spending time with my grandmother, which was actually only 1 hour drive away from Munich for me because she lived in Nuremberg.
Right.
Spending time with her, that was something I never did because I was not really thinking of. And the second thing comes to friendships and relationships. So actually spending time with the people most important to you around you, whether that's talking about a girlfriend, talking about your best friends, your old friends from high school. And these past 4 months, I was fortunate enough not having to think about my day-to-day life as much as I've been doing before, and that was really something that made me different. Definitely shaped me.
So actually, I'm going to go into that for a moment.
Yeah.
You talked about missing things in that bubble of and I think it's something people might be cognizant of, particularly now that we're all reflecting on, like, we're about to come out of a lockdown where we're within 6 months of coming out of these things. Um, and I know I'm spending time trying not to go back into the habits that I had before lockdown. When it came to, let's take the friendships and the relationship side, um, I get the feeling that with someone like yourself, you enjoy it when things are new. Like when new is good, new is always good. I feel it myself. However, family is constant. Friends can be constant, and relationships are very new for about 3 to 9 months, depending on it. Which afterwards, there's always something. Um, so, to what extent did the fact that these things were not new play a part in the not putting enough attention to them?
A huge one.
Yeah.
and you might recognize it, or you might don't. And I'm actually also interested in hearing about the others that are listening to this, of what they think about this, because I think it's quite controversial, what I'm about to say. But I think people are taking even the smallest things too lightly for granted. So if something is there in their lives and they're not hearing or seeing any change, that means for them that it's set, right? But actually, that's the biggest mistake you can make, thinking it's set. And actually, it's funny, you can compare this with sales. You think a deal is set. Well, it's not. You missed one thing in your medic discovery. And it's the same with friendships and with relationships. If you live in your day-to-day life and you don't see a reason or hear a reason or think of a reason to talk about it, you don't have to talk about it. But that's the biggest mistake. Talk about things where you think you don't need to talk about, because there's always surprises coming up.
There's always surprises coming up. I think that's a fantastic way of putting this, because a lot of your changes in your life have been surprises.
Yeah. Yes. 100%.
So with that, with all of these different changes and all of these different things, you're obviously quite confident, or at least that's on the external, and maybe we can crack into that a little bit later. But to what extent, or how do you make sure that the constant and consistent changing on the outside doesn't affect your sense of self on the inside?
So I touched upon, this word reflecting, right? And what I mean by that is, for the past 4 months, I had the daily opportunity of actually really thinking not only what do I want, but also what do the people around me maybe want. Not that that should be a determining factor, but it should be something you think about, because then again, we're talking about relationships in a way of with your family, for example, how they view you. And if you're not talking about that, and you won't be talking about it if you reflect about it yourself, then you're missing something. So I think this continuous striving for having conversations with people about things that you take for granted, that's a good start there. And I'd say that would be my answer to that question.
So having conversations with people about what each of you take for granted.
Yes.
Have you had one of those conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. A ton.
And how have they gone?
It's maybe one example is with my grandmother. So my grandmother from my mother's side, so the German side, which was 1 hour drive away, but I never did, pretty much in the past 2-3 years, until the very end. So unfortunately, she passed away like a couple of months. But I was really fortunate that I had the time to actually visit her, and more often. And so starting a conversation there with her was, yeah, I never really wanted to bother you and calling you too much because I knew you were so busy.
That's what she said to you?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
And then I realized, holy shit, sorry for my language, but you don't need to not call me because you're worried that I'm too busy. I will pick up that call, or will call you back. Yeah. But that that's one big example, right? And so I only had the opportunity because, I started the conversation by visiting her. So that is one big example there.
Yeah. It seems like you've come to this realization quite recently.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's a new version of you that I'm kind of talking to right now, one that's kind of in the process of settling down into what you're up to. But one thing that I've seen that has been very persistent with you is kind of this joy of travel, this sense of traveling. Typically when people travel a lot, they travel a lot because they, like I said, they enjoy the new, but they enjoy meeting as wide a variety of people as possible. And I think that fits into you as well because of the whole sales side of things and the business side of things. So with that in mind, with the fact that you really enjoy meeting all of these people, um, how does that play an element in your life outside of the work side of things? So obviously with work, you sell to people, you cold call people, you do all that. That's just talking to people. However, to what extent, how does that manifest in every other area of your life?
So I'm by nature extremely curious, I'd say. So I always want to know how other people think.
Mm.
And I want to touch upon one thing you said that comes natural, or it's part of my job talking to many people, but they're not different people. They're all the
Right.
same. The thing is, the characters are different, of course, and you have the so-called personas, and then the moods, and depending on results of their quarter, etc. Whether that's working in marketing or in sales, and then the one bitching about the other side, you know how it is.
Yes.
But the thing is, they're all the same because they're all working in this software industry, and they're living in a very fast-paced world with a lot of pressure. And I think that the new version of me, also relating to traveling and wanting to talk, being curious about many other people out there, is realizing there's really no need for that high of a pressure in your day-to-day routine. And when I learned one thing, now also making the jump into my career at Miro and moving to Amsterdam, is what I heard of everyone I talked to during the process at Miro is, you know what, prioritizing is the most important aspect of everything. And that means that you don't have to stress about doing every little task or talking to every possible contact. You just have to prioritize. And I think that translates also to life. So just prioritize a couple of things and you will be much more relaxed. I think that's the same also for traveling. Don't try to see everything when you're visiting. Just, take a couple of days and just strolling through the city. It sounds, cliche, or it sounds like it's the logical thing to do, but many don't. If you really think about it, you always want to have an agenda, always want to maximize your time. And the new me definitely is thinking differently about that now.
You were the definition of the word busy for a very
Yeah,
long time.
100%. I moved this meeting 2 times.
That is very true. So where do you think that came from? Like this
The
sense
switching
of,
part?
no, this busyness, this,
Oh,
not necessarily the switch, because the switch I think came from a
yeah.
big life change.
Yes.
However, the busyness, the grinding it out, the happy to move countries, the okay, I'm going to set up this company. I don't want to do this engineering degree anymore. Demo desk, okay, sure. Let's be person number 6 and let's go build this company. That's
Yeah.
all really high grind, busy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that come from?
I think one part of it is definitely expectations to myself. So me knowing that I can achieve something, even if there is, sometimes not zero, but very low chances of succeeding, or at least, hitting what you want to hit. That's one major part. But I think for many people, including myself at the very early stages, making the move to Zurich, also studying, is definitely also outside pressure. And for example, if your parents are successful people, they studied and did the typical career track, you're also somehow expected to do so, right? Even if they don't want you to do it necessarily just because they did it. Still, that pressure internally builds up. And I've been talking to many friends of mine, also from high school, for example. And I must say, most of them, not most of them, but many of them do things or did things because it was the thing to do. And I would like to challenge that. Is it really the thing you need to do? And I learned it pretty much the hard way, right? So I had a huge a failure experience realizing that I'm not going to be a mechanical engineer soon because I had that lack of passion in majority for it. But at the same time, that opened up a door. And then when I really went for it and actually also told my new closest friends from uni days that I'm going to quit studying in order to further pursue my career in entrepreneurship and sales, that's when I got the messages, oh man, I could have never done that, but that's amazing. That's great. How did you have the courage? And that opened up my eyes. Why did you never say that? Or why did you never seriously think about that for yourself?
So what is it, do you think, about you that gave you the self-confidence and the self-belief to be able to go against what is a status quo? I mean, was this, sorry, I was going to say it wasn't in Germany. This was in Brussels. Yeah.
What exactly?
This decision to quit. The people that you were talking to were
that was Germany already. That was definitely Germany, because I was officially still a student in Germany, right? So
right.
when I moved to Munich,
well, Germans love the status quo. I know
yeah.
I hate stereotypes, but I've been there for a while.
It's a given.
Yeah. So what is it about you that made you go against a status quo and made you go, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do this.
So first of all, I realized I wasn't getting anywhere if I don't find that one passion. I wasn't going to get anywhere. The thing is, I didn't. You want to? Yeah, go ahead.
It takes people till they're 60 years of age to figure that out, and you got that at like 20. So how'd you get that?
Yeah. Because you think of it. Okay, if I'm gonna study, for example, mechanical engineering, if I'm going to study business, whatever direction, usually the people that then do that and haven't found their passion, you do a career, stable career, make good money probably, but most of them really never made a big jump. And I think it makes me scared doing something like that. But at the same time, I know that gives me so much pleasure. And then making that jump one time, starting out the company still back in Switzerland, but also then moving into software sales in Munich, made me realize, holy shit, I really enjoy this. So this was a good jump. Let's do that again. It's a thrill. So you're kind of also looking for that next thrill, right? But the second thing, and I don't want to ignore that, is I do realize that I'm coming from a very, very good background. So I always had a cushion, a backup cushion. So I knew if I would totally mess up and not find my passion, and also the next thing would fail, I could still go back home and probably not get a beating, just a longer speech.
Are any of your parents entrepreneurs? I feel like they are.
No, they're not. I have one. There's one in my family. My uncle, he's an entrepreneur. He built something, very nicely over the past 15 years, I'd say. But the others are very traditional. So my parents, my father is a lawyer, and my mother, came from politics. So it's a very traditional career path if you compare it to what I did.
Very traditional career paths.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've known about you since we started talking was, and even since we met, whatever it was, a year and a bit ago, you've high expectations of yourself, and you've kind of got these high expectations of others, but expecting people to be able to let them down. Like, you can't let someone else down, but they can let you down, kind of a way, is my interpretation of it. And that definitely comes from a sense of self-confidence and a sense of self-safety. And I think that's been a big thing here. You've had the self-confidence to really to travel, to just jump into different scenarios. I won't say without thought, because you definitely thought it through, but you weren't paralyzed by the thought of it. You're now in Dubai just because you don't want to be locked down. There's I mean, the cars, for example, again, that to me seems very high energy. Again, that brings us back to the new. But I feel that people are very accepting of the new when they know that that's not going to be an element of themselves. That's not going to be an element of themselves that's put out there. So my question for you is, if you spent all of this time in new and in this world of newness and excitement, and now you're entering this new world again, into a new world of new and exciting, and it's a new job and it's a new country, and we're back to this. How are you going to stop yourself from getting bored if you now have the reflection piece in your brain? If you're a little bit more self-aware, how are you going to stop yourself from doing this again and leaving the company in 6 months?
I love the question. Probably every potential future employer was also scared of that. I remember having an interview with another very successful company in the area of collaboration. And that potential future boss told me, this is all great and everything, and we want to have you, but what's gonna stop you from getting to the next job once you get bored, probably in 6 or 7 months, because there's gonna be some routine. That's literally what he said. And I love the question because it's the first time I heard it back then, and now you're repeating it. So it's very valid, because I think also on to the outside, people see that I live off energy and excitement. So I think you always have to make sure that we talked about this before, that you not only think about the day to day, but also maybe in a year or so. And for example, for me, that is knowing right now, being in software sales, there's definitely still a couple of years with a clear room of improvement to myself in my profession. And for me, this is the first time that I'm joining a company, so Miro in this case, in Amsterdam, where I know there's so many things that I now can learn about from the best of the best in the industry. They have that reputation. And that made me choose this job in particular, because I knew even if what I'm going to be doing in the next 6 months at Miro is maybe going to be a bit boring, there's going to be 5 other options where I can jump into that company without having to make another big jump, which others would maybe also see as, too soon. And even I would criticize myself then. Is that probably too soon? So that is one argument there. Also, to be honest, the major reason why people are working in itself is not only because of money, because otherwise, they want to do something with their day, right? It's fun lying here on the beach or having a boat party all day, but you're going to get bored. So essentially, I think the most beautiful thing that you can achieve is definitely having the financial wealth of deciding when you want to work, but not necessarily not working. So I think that is just not an option for me. And if we're thinking in 5 to 10 years, where I see myself, it's definitely in a role where I have complete 100% control of what I want to do with my day to day.
100% control. We're coming back to that.
Yeah.
I've got 2 questions left for you. The first one is, what is it that you wish people knew about you? Something that people don't know that you wish people knew about you.
I think I said this earlier, right? I'm a person that lives normally, especially in my last chapter, in a daily business, day to day, and I live in the moment. However, I can also get very emotional about these long-term plans and long-term things. So if sometimes I come across as somebody that just lives in that moment, and maybe sometimes not really cares too much, that is not necessarily true. That just means that we haven't talked deeply enough, or didn't have the conversation to talk enough about it. And that's something I discovered recently as well. So, having deeper conversations with my friends, especially, it's been a long time I did that. And there they also realized, okay, to the outside, he now has so much fun and, just doing that day to day and really doesn't care. But in the long term, of course, I know this is also not only it. So I think that is definitely one part I wish that people, knew immediately. But obviously you can't portray all of that.
It's not all fun and games.
No.
Yeah.
It is not.
absolutely not. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Of course.
So the very last question that I have for you. This podcast is about people's why. And what I like to do at the end is I kind of like to surmise as to what I think your why is. But I'm going to ask you first. So why do you think you do what you do? And not do what you do is in a professional sense, but in a who you are. Why is it that who you are is somebody who does a lot of travel, who's got high expectations of themselves, who is not afraid to take risks, who loves newness, and has the capacity to get lost in the day to day?
Short answer, because I know there's an opportunity to do so, and having not done so, I would not be as happy as when I would be doing so. That is definitely the key thing there, because life is too short. So sometimes, of course, we're going to have these cliche sentences in here, but it's just too short, right? And also the past couple of months reflecting and talking to people and realizing, wow, this is going fast. Why not do it? And you notice that you become a happier person just by doing it and having the experiences. I also know friends that are still at home with their parents, which is totally fine. It's totally fine. But I also know that they're probably missing out on a couple of things that are not as easy to do in 10 years versus in the next 5 years, probably. So that is probably the most clear reason for me.
FOMO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, big word, yeah. Fear of missing out.
That seems to be... So what I'm seeing here, what I see is somebody who's aware that they have all of the options and is worried that they're not taking the right one. So they try and take as many as possible. Making quick, risky-ish decisions in order to make a decision. In that the biggest fear is standing still and growing mass. Someone with high expectations of themselves. Someone, you mentioned cars, fast cars.
Yeah, very fast.
Cars. There we go. That makes sense. No, it's not a Ford Focus, like. But yeah, someone who is aware of all of the opportunities in the world and genuinely wants to experience as much of it as possible.
Yeah.
That, I think, was the why. I think there's a new element creeping in, and it's that element of sustainability. I think a sustainable life is something that you're starting to build, and your new why is coming in as the right opportunities for the long term rather than the best opportunity.
I love how you put that. So I think, first of all, I think if your career in sales development or sales in general wouldn't work out, I think you would be doing great also just analyzing people and doing this for a living, to be honest. Because, yeah, it's true. It's true. I'm somebody that hates the thought of, missing something when I know that, I probably would be happy in that moment. But at the same time, it's I think you put it perfectly. It's not sustainable, and I'm not only talking about sustainable in the capacity of a human being when they're older. I'm also talking about the fact that there's this one sentence. I don't remember who said it first, so I'm not going to try. But it's pleasure doesn't equal happiness, and I love that quote. Because it pretty much puts it right. It doesn't matter if it's about relationships. It doesn't matter if it's about the job, if it's about the money, etc. Long-term happiness is definitely choosing the right things over a longer term, and therefore somehow eliminating a few of the short-term options. Of course.
Did you?
I don't know if I'm there yet. I don't know if I'm there yet, because I definitely still love this fast-paced world. But I do realize that is a thing, coming up in the upcoming years.
Did you know that's biological? That dopamine and serotonin are the opposite of one another, and serotonin is the long-term happiness and dopamine is the short-term hit. And the more dopamine you have in your system, the less serotonin your body is allowed to produce.
I actually didn't know it in that much detail. That's very interesting to know, but that explains a lot.
People in Vegas, for example, will have high amounts of dopamine, but will be absolutely depressed because their body cannot produce serotonin. There's a little piece of info for you.
Learn something new every day. I love it.
I very much appreciate. Well, we've had a good conversation. I got a page full of notes here, but I'm delighted we had this conversation. I'm really glad that I got you on. What would you like people to know? So where would you like people to come and find you, or what would you like people to do now?
So I would like to shout out one thing. So on the side, I'm also doing, a bit of work for Revenue Collective. So this is, this community initially for sales professionals, but right now we're already in operations, in marketing, finance. And one thing we kicked off quite recently is our mentoring program. And what it does is actually people from all backgrounds. So it doesn't matter if they're just starting out as an SDR or are becoming the next CFO at a listed company. Everyone is at the same time a mentor and a mentee at one point. And this is what we really want to accelerate, because I've done it now 2-3 times on both ends, and I love that. So if there's somebody that just wants to talk, just like this, basically, but then with me, if they think I can help them out, please do reach out, because I'm very open to this. I'm going to be very busy again, as we put it. But this is definitely also something that is close to my heart, because I know what it did for me. And that's what I want people to know. You can reach me on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn, perfect. You're not Joe on LinkedIn, so look at the title of the podcast and to get the correct spelling.
Exactly.
So if you like people to come and connect with you on LinkedIn and to chat with you about, well, mentorship and menteeship.
There we go. We go. It's something great to do, and also thank you to you, Brian. This has been a great talk, and the first moment you reached out to me about the show you were planning to do, I was very excited. Can't wait to see who else is on the show, and just seeing the whole story on your end, how we met each other and how we're talking now. That's a great story on its own, I think.
Absolutely. Maybe we'll tell it on your podcast one day. Well, look, thank you very much for joining, and I'll chat with you again soon. And there we have it, the life of Joachim Van Erps. Today's episode was really interesting, particularly for myself, because I too burned out at a younger age. I used to live life at breakneck speed. I waved at my limit as I streamed past it. And today it's very interesting to see it from the opposite side. Joe is one of those people who has lived life in multiple different countries with a very stable sense as to who he is, and that has been his rock as he's gone through life. But my main feeling out of today's episode, out of today's conversation, has sort of been one of loss. It seems like Joe feels like he has lost some of the last elements of his life. The standout quote is, "You miss things when you're in a bubble. You don't notice things." And he felt as though he had lost time with family, lost time with friends, relationships, all in pursuit of a career. And whilst he definitely has a very successful career, I feel as though we typically promote career growth because it's very easy to measure a career growth. It's not easy to measure a growth in a relationship, or growth in your family, or growth in a friendship. and therefore what gets measured gets done. That is the key learning that I've taken away from today. Pleasure does not equal happiness is the second one that I've taken away from today. And that in pushing for short-term happiness, we're actually neglecting long-term happiness. This is very interesting to have with somebody he's only 25, 26. So this is a revelation that he's having very early in his life. It'll be interesting to see if and how things change as Joe grows. As you'll know, maybe the authentic, chilled out nature of his Dutch heritage will come out. Or maybe I'm just being stereotypical. Who knows? Thank you for joining us on today. I'd love to know more as to what you thought of today's episode. Did you see yourself in Joe, in living life at breakneck speed, and what impact that can have? Even today, I found that Joe speaks slower than he did when we first met all those years ago. Please do let me know what you think. You can find me on any social media. Next week, we interview the first episode of a 3-episode long series introducing Gabrielle Blackwell. I will tell you more about her next week. Between now and then, please do let me know what you thought of today's episode, and I will chat with you again soon.